Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. In today's video, we're talking about the fourth house and what it means when you have planets sitting in your fourth house. And the fourth house is the house of emotional happiness. How happy you are, how content you are. It is generally the house that represents your foundation in life, meaning the foundational essence you were born in, so like the family you were born in, how you grew up, and also it represents your private life. It's opposite the 10th house, which is like your public life, and then the fourth house is your private life, your inner life. It's like that zone of your chart or the area of your life where only you have access to and not everyone else. Not the public, but you only, and only the people you let into that private life. And we'll talk about what this means when you have planets there in terms of your own happiness and in terms of your own private life, and a little bit touching on your childhood as well. And of course, as always, this applies to any chart that you look at, not just your sidereal chart or whole sign or all the charts. It applies to all the charts for this video. And I'll leave the calculator down below if you guys don't know your chart yet. So let's start off with the sun. So the sun in the fourth house, this placement is interesting because the sun is most comfortable in the 10th house, which is the opposite house. So you might find with this placement of sun in the fourth house, you're more comfortable in your private life. You're more comfortable maybe outside of the public eye, not being too public with yourself or expressing yourself too much on a public world stage. You might find that you find more happiness in your home life. And speaking of happiness, you might find that you are more content when you are just at home, when you're with your family. You can be a very family-oriented person and not be so much concerned about what you're doing or achieving at all times or your career at all times, but really like your home private life. This can create more of a private person. And when it comes to how you grew up, you could have grown up in a situation that was really focused on your own development, focused on your own childhood growth. This is a placement where it's like maybe you grew up in a happy sense or played a lot of games as a child, things like that. The list goes on. But that is generally what happens when the sun is in your fourth house. And then if the moon is in your fourth house, this is a great placement because it's the natural house of the moon. It's the natural house of Cancer. So with moon in the fourth house, you might find that you're someone who's naturally very happy, but I wouldn't even say happy. I would say content. Like you're content with life, you're content with things. If your moon's not debilitated, you might find that you're just someone who views life in a way that is content with what you have around you, not necessarily always seeking new things, but you're happy with your family, with your living situation. And you could have grown up in a very comfortable way, in a way that was very nurturing for you. You can have a very close relationship with your mother, for example, with your grandmother. Any feminine figure really in your family you might find a close bond with. And that is essentially the manifestation that can happen with moon in your fourth house. If you have Mercury sitting in your fourth house, you can find with this placement that you're someone who can be very introspective, someone who's very nostalgic, reflective. Maybe your thoughts don't express themselves too outwardly, but you might find that you just think a lot to yourself. Maybe you write or you draw, or you can communicate in a way that is more one-on-one with your family members or just with yourself, not necessarily expressing yourself that outwardly all the time. And when it comes to your family life and maybe how you grew up, you could have grown up in a situation where you had a lot of activities as a kid, a lot of talents. You could come from a family where writing is a theme, like you have aunts and uncles that were writers, or anyone involved in media or communications. You can find that that's kind of like a theme in your family. And overall, you can be someone who is close with your cousins even, or siblings, or have a close bond with your cousins or people that are related to you by like your family members. And that is the, what did I say? Like that is the manifestation of Mercury in the fourth house. If Venus is sitting in your fourth house, this means that you're someone who finds a lot of comfort and pleasure in your home life. You can have a home that is really well decorated, for example, a home that is very luxurious. Maybe you put a lot of money and effort into your home. And this placement is a pretty comfortable placement for Venus. Venus wants to be in a house like this that is very focused on luxury and comfort. And Venus is a planet that doesn't want to work. So fourth house kind of aligns with that same value of like not necessarily working all the time, which is 10th house energy. But Venus is comfortable here because it gets to relax, indulge, and do very Venus-y things. So you can be someone who does do those things and find a lot of indulgence and pleasure in your home life. And you could have grown up in a situation where art was a theme, where maybe in your literal home there was like nice art. Maybe your parents were artists. Maybe your mom was an artist. You're exposed to like luxury and nice things at a very young age. Maybe you even received nice things at a young age. But either way, you could have just been inadvertently surrounded by nice things or luxuries in your childhood, and now in your adulthood, maybe you still try to surround yourself that way in your home life. And if you have Mars sitting in your fourth house, you can find that when it comes to how you act, how you really express your passion to the world, how assertive you are, you can be someone who's a little bit more hesitant, cautious, more introspective, maybe even a little passive aggressive. Mars isn't that comfortable in the fourth house. Mars is the most comfortable in the 10th house, for example, because it's a very active house, a house of achievement and doing things and being aggressive. So when you have Mars in the fourth house, you can find that your aggressive energy, your assertive energy, the energy that carries with Mars is a little bit more held back, a little bit more private. This can create a little bit of conflict in your home life, even or growing up in a situation where there was conflict around you. And we won't get too deep into that because it's a sensitive topic. But of course, Mars is a malefic planet. Having it in the fourth house isn't very conducive to that kind of mushy-gushy feeling of happiness that the fourth house brings. So you can kind of feel that sense of inner conflict, or just kind of like feeling like you want to do things and not knowing how to express it that well. The list can go on here, but it does kind of create that inner strife, and you could have grown up with that in your household as well. If you have Jupiter sitting in your fourth house, this means that when it comes to happiness and contentment, you can be someone who is very happy, is very content. This is a strong place for Jupiter to be, since Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, and the fourth house is the natural house of Cancer. So you can find that you're someone who is kind of content with your life, happy with things, jovial. This gives you possibly a home life or a childhood that where maybe you were surrounded by education, surrounded by knowledge. Maybe your parents were teachers or something like that, or even your grandmother or forefathers, anyone like that could have been involved in the education field. You could have been someone who had somewhat of an international upbringing where you traveled, or maybe you weren't born in the USA or you're born somewhere else. That's really possible with Jupiter here. But either way, your childhood could have been very fulfilling, very supportive of you, supportive of your growth. Knowledge could have been huge, or learning. And when it comes to happiness, in general, you can find that you are more content or more happy with your circumstances at any given moment. And if Saturn is sitting in your fourth house, you can find that when it comes to your inner contentment, your inner happiness, that you feel a certain sense of lack or a certain sense of disappointment. Saturn here causes delays. So maybe early in life, you kind of felt those negative feelings. Maybe your home life growing up wasn't as pleasant, or there was that theme of lack there. Unless you have a benefic in this house like Venus or Jupiter, that kind of cancels out. But just Saturn sitting by itself alone here can create that sense of lack or disparity. But over time, you do create your own happiness, your own contentment on your own terms through your own sense of discipline and responsibility. And when it comes to maybe your family, you could have grown up in a family that was a little bit more strict, authoritative, critical even. There is that sense of strictness with Saturn being here. So I won't get too deep into the whole family thing, but of course you guys can probably imagine how Saturn kind of impacted your childhood and how that childhood impacts your natural happiness on an everyday basis. If you have Pluto sitting in your fourth house, you might find that when it comes to your inner contentment, your inner happiness, there can be a theme of pessimism present, a theme of disappointment, a theme of extremes even. Pluto being here can be a little bit malefic, since the fourth house does deal with the sense of happiness, and Pluto is a natural malefic. It kind of represents that negative energy. You can feel that strongly with that being in the fourth house. And this can create a very private person, someone who's very private, really keen on your private life, keeping what you have in your family life and details about your private life really a secret. And when it comes to the family you grew up in, or maybe your childhood, you could have been surrounded by themes of maybe destruction, or themes of death, or themes of anything really Pluto related. I won't get too deep into it, but as you guys can probably imagine and think about, Pluto does kind of create a little bit of strife and turbulence when it's in the 4th house. And overall, that's what you can feel manifesting with Pluto being in your 4th house. If Neptune is sitting in your 4th house, you can find that when it comes to your happiness and contentment, you're someone who spends a lot of energy at home doing imaginative things. And maybe those imaginative things bring you a lot of happiness and joy. When you're kind of retreating into your own fantasies, that's like a source of happiness for you. And especially if it's like music or creativity, that's like your source there. And when it comes to the family you grew up in or your childhood, you could have grown up in a dynamic that maybe lacked boundaries for some reason. Maybe there wasn't a strong boundary of like who's who, or who plays what role in your family. There could have been like that kind of blurriness that Neptune does bring. There can also be a certain theme of family secrets or things that were hidden from you in your youth, and maybe you find out later, but secrets do come to mind now with Neptune being in the 4th. You might even find in your present day life that you're more private and secret about your own private affairs. If Uranus is sitting in your 4th house, you can find that your upbringing and your childhood could have been a little bit strange. Something about it was erratic, unstable, maybe not too grounded. You could have moved a lot as a kid, for example, had a kind of weird or unconventional family dynamic. And when it comes to your happiness and contentment, maybe you can find a lot of contentment through your own creative endeavors, maybe online. I feel like the internet could have been a sort of happy place for you as a kid or even now. And when it comes to your inner contentment in life in general, you might feel a little bit of dissatisfaction sometimes, or not feeling completely at peace. Uranus energy can be really erratic and unpredictable. So maybe your own happiness, your own inner contentment can feel a little bit also turbulent and unpredictable. But overall, this is kind of like the placement that this can manifest as. And let us know down below what planets you have in the 4th house. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you in my next one.